Hi everyone, I'm Gil Minervini and I'm honoured to be your host today. Welcome to Stepping Out, our webinar, It's Time to Talk. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We're privileged to have three very special guests with us today. Lucy Brogden AM, Chair and Commissioner of the National Mental Health Commission, Rene Michelle, published author, public speaker, and an inspirational story of surviving childhood sexual abuse. And Melissa Holmes, our case manager, representing the Stepping Out community. You'll be able to submit questions via the Q&A icon, and we will have some time after our guest speakers to address as many questions as possible. If anything discussed today raises issues for you, please contact Lifeline for immediate support. Or of course, you can contact Stepping Out during business hours. Now let's get into it. Statistics show that 1 in 6 women in Australia identified as having been abused before the age of 15. That is an alarming statistic. We know that typically a survivor of childhood sexual abuse does not disclose their abuse until many, many years later, with the average being 20 years later. Melissa, let's start with you. Why do you think survivors wait so long?
Thanks, Gil. Well, the very nature of child sexual abuse is in that inherent power imbalance and the vulnerability of the child. So there's ongoing trust issues. So they may never find the right space or the right person to disclose their experiences to. According to the Royal Commission, the overwhelming reasons for not disclosing earlier is overwhelming shame and embarrassment, fear of retribution. They don't think that they'll be believed, and also the grooming tactics are such that they enforce the secrecy and the shame. For example, some relationships, the survivor might feel like they've been made to feel special. And it's only years later that they realise that that relationship was actually a case of childhood sexual abuse.
Rene, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and author of your book, Battle Scars Are Beautiful, from your personal experience, why do you think it's so hard for survivors to disclose?
Yeah, look, definitely shame is such a big issue that the majority of survivors that I speak to, including myself, carried for so many years. And Melissa mentioned that power imbalance. You really do feel as a child, well, did I do something wrong? Was it somehow my fault? Should I have fought harder? Should I have run away? Should I, there's just so much doubt and confusion. Abuse on a child is so illogical. And in a child brain, how do you make sense of such a thing? And I just became so fearful that it was actually my fault. And the language that was used was very much that way. You're a naughty girl. No one will believe you. It's your word against mine. So very manipulative tactics. And really, I truly did believe that maybe there is some truth in that. You're the adult. I should trust you. I should believe you. And it silences us. And we carry that shame. And that shame is so debilitating that it actually overwhelms any other type of logic or sense.
Yeah, thanks, Rene. It's well known, though, that early intervention often leads to better outcomes. Adults who have experienced childhood trauma often present later in life with significant mental health issues, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, eating disorders even. Lucy, in your vast experience in the mental health sector and as chair of the National Mental Health Commission, in general, do you think that accessing support earlier may improve these outcomes?
Thanks, Gil, and thank you, Rene, for sharing your lived experience with us today. It's so powerful to have experts through experience, even if it's traumatic and tragic as it is. Look, absolutely early intervention is really powerful and we can change people's trajectories, but we also have to respect, as Melissa's touched on, that it is very hard for people to speak out. And I think if we look to some of the recommendations from the Royal Commission, it was about really skilling up our workforce across the community in educational settings, in social services, to be able to really listen when people do try and disclose, because often people will try and disclose when they're quite young. They may not have the language for it. but they may give off some clues. And so we need skilled people to listen and be ready to respond quickly if young people do have that courage and capacity more than as well as courage to do that. If they don't, then services and systems have to be ready for that at that point of disclosure, to work with that person and then reset their trajectory. And it is possible to do that work.
Yeah, thank you. And Rene, back to you. You've experienced this firsthand. Do you think that accessing support earlier as a young adult would have helped you? And how do you think it would have helped?
Yeah, look, immensely, without a doubt. So I can't answer that more enthusiastically than that, because even my work, the last couple of years in child protection and working with young children, we don't talk about this enough. And in my day, there was no awareness weeks, there was no days or campaigns, there was definitely no talk in the community or the school system around body safety or child protection or what it actually means to be safe and protected. The more we speak, the more courage, and the more a child goes, well, hang on a minute, that's what's happening to me. Okay, well, my teacher or this person has just said I can talk to them, that they're safe if I go to them. And I know I was desperate for someone to notice that my behavior changed. I withdrew. I became very quiet. I used to be a very bubbly child. Then I became very shy and withdrawn. And we need to get better at noticing, as Lucy said, those little tweaks. And the more we talk about it and the more we know that, hang on, this stuff does go on, the more we can be aware of our surroundings and the more children feel safe. The more they hear, you are safe, it is not your fault, and we're here for you, the more children will speak up.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Melissa, then why do some child sexual abuse survivors seem to cope better than others?
Well, there's many variables in childhood sexual abuse. So it really depends on the nature of the abuse. So it'd be the relationship to the perpetrator, the grooming tactics that they used, the frequency and the extent of the abuse. Sometimes people can seem to have everything together. They've got the beautiful house, the 2.3 children, and they fall apart later in life. Trauma can be triggered by grief, by loss, by another trauma, or by hormonal changes. So the biggest protective factor that people have is the emotional safety net provided by a family, supportive family, or a community that provides strength and comfort to people who've been through childhood sexual abuse. So that's at the heart of what we do at Stepping Out. We provide a safe space and a community of survivors for people to start the healing process. Other things are people who engage in psychotherapy. So that is another safe space. And they're learning things that were denied them in childhood, how to love people, how to trust, how to engage with the community. And the other thing I would say is people who engage in conscious self-care on a daily basis do better, because it's things like meditation or mindful exercise like walking or yoga. It just brings them back into their body. So those little things help people. Some people cope much better than others.
Time to get off the couch seems to be the message for everything. Rene, you've experienced many years of sexual abuse, 2 suicide attempts, substance abuse and harmful relationships. Do you feel that your childhood was affected by the lack of these kind of protective factors that we're talking about?
Oh my gosh, yes. And that was how this all began, was that my mum's own mental health and coping strategies were not there. They just were non-existent. So she opened the door, tangibly and actually literally, to people that came in and abused me and took advantage of me. And because she was numb to her own pain and self-medicating through alcohol and prescription medication, she did not pick up on any of the signs. That attachment that I should have had with her was non-existent. So not only did I not go to her for help, the adults that surrounded our family home most days were the people abusing me. Therefore, my entire understanding of what healthy was, what healthy people, healthy relationships, I'd never seen a relationship that wasn't violent. So I went down that track. So it's what we see and it's what we understand. And without that, our reality and our understanding of the world is so flawed and so skewed.
Continuing on, thanks Rene, and continuing on with you, do you think there's a significant time or event in your life where you managed to turn your incredibly confronting and traumatic childhood into regaining control of your life and becoming the incredibly successful and terrific woman you are today?
Yeah, look, I was very blessed, and I still say hand on heart, it was the birth of my daughter, my first child, because it really did all of a sudden, I was like, well, you're not just responsible for you now, you have this little person that you need to protect. And everything that I didn't have growing up, everything that wasn't provided to me, just poured out of me. And she really was the pivotal point in my life where I said, no matter what it takes, you need to do this, not just for yourself now, but for her. And I would have walked across hot coals to change things for her and to break that cycle in my own family.
Thanks, Rene. Lucy, back to you. In general, do you think that protective factors can improve the outcome for a person with mental illness?
We know that protective factors are hugely powerful, and some of them are really basic, and we've touched on them already. Having safe people around us, people that we know in our community, and it's really important that we actually teach out all of our kids to have at least 5 safe people in their lives that they can go to, and there are people within family and outside of family, and encourage those relationships from really day one to support our kids and know that that support is there. But we also need to skill up the people in our community to appreciate that they have those roles. And it's, you know, it's really powerful. Just by way of simple anecdote, I'm the manager of our son's basketball team, and we had a training session and I kind of rolled my eyes. He's in year 11. What more do I need to learn about, you know, team sheets? But they went through all the compliance issues of working with children and the responsibilities for coaches, particularly because a lot of them are young old boys of the school. And then they said to all of us, these boys might come back to one of you and say, you changed my life. And we may not appreciate that in our role day to day, but for that young person, we were the rock, the stability, the safe harbour, and we can all hold that place. But if we appreciate it and we know some of the signs, like as Rene touched on, we can begin to be that life changer for someone. And it doesn't need any special skills other than to be interested and observant and compassionate.
It's been reported that there is a correlation between childhood sexual abuse and domestic violence, with survivors 3 times more likely to experience partner violence as adults. Rene, do you think that your abuse as a child affected your relationship choices as an adult?
Yeah, look, my identity was shattered. I had no self-worth. I had no idea who I was, that I even had any value whatsoever. So my idea of a healthy relationship, or what I was worth, was so below what healthy was. I didn't even know what healthy was. It had never been role modeled in my home. I grew up without my father in the home. And then the relationships that my mum had were so regular with random people, and they fought all the time. There was a lot of violence, a lot of dysfunction. So I honestly did believe this is life. This is what relationships look like. So if someone was kind to me for 5 minutes, you were my best friend, because I just didn't have any healthy understanding or awareness of self. So I jumped headlong into relationships, found out within days that this is not a good person for me, but then I felt stuck because I had no voice. I'd been silenced my whole life, and I carried this huge secret. So even I was dysfunctional. I hadn't communicated my abuse to anybody, so I harbored all the shame still. And it was violent relationship after violent relationship, because I didn't know my worth. I didn't know there was anything better than that.
Melissa, is this something that you face as a stepping out case manager?
Oh, absolutely. Renee's experience speaks volumes. So there's a huge correlation between CSA and DV, just because of the familiarity of that abuse and the low self-esteem and the vulnerability of the victim. So the same same grooming tactics are used in both, is isolation, alienation, humiliation, threats, coercive control. So without any support or treatment, CSA victims are very vulnerable to domestic violence because of their lack of agency, as Rene just described. So, and they become reliant on the perpetrator, and they feel they've got nowhere else to go and no one else to be. So often fleeing a domestic violent relationship is the catalyst for women coming into stepping out, and it's often to protect their children. So Rene also spoke about that fierce love, that they might not protect themselves, but they will protect their child. So we see a lot of that, and we are able to find safe and affordable housing so that they're no longer reliant on anyone else, and it is at that point that the healing can start.
Yeah, thank you. The theme of CSA Awareness Week is It's Time to Talk, and isn't it refreshing to see these fantastic women all speaking about this subject? What are the benefits, Melissa, of attending a Stepping Out program and encouraging survivors to share their stories?
Well, it's not necessarily to share their stories, it's to share the experience. It's to address that social isolation that we've talked about, how people feel so alone and so ashamed. And so it's really to address those things rather than to share their stories. That space is really for psychotherapy. But we're a specialist service, so of course we're trauma informed, and we understand the nature of childhood sexual abuse, and we're a smaller service, so we're much more personal, and of course a safe space. So, and we have programs that are according to people's levels of needs. So we might have a social inclusion program, which would involve just going to a community centre. Pre-COVID, we used to go to art galleries and coffees, but we'll get there again one day. And now we have psychoeducational workshops for people who are at a different stage, who are ready to really explore and understand the impact that CSA has had on their lives and their relationships. So, so the benefits are that the survivors no longer feel alone, they no longer feel the shame or self-blame. They're accepted into a community of women with shared experience, and that peer support can be really invaluable. So we know that we can't change the past, but with these programs, we just hope to help the survivors to manage the present and therefore create a better future with more meaning and well-being in their lives.
Thank you. Over to you, Rene. In your book, you talk about sharing your story, but you say, be careful who you share it with. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, look, this is a really interesting one. My ex-husband, that was a 17-year-long narcissistic, very controlling, very manipulative relationship. But I so wanted to give my daughter a healthy environment. So I tried to share with him my past. I tried to open up, and I thought, okay, well, this is my husband. He has to be this safe person, and I can share with him. And he was not strong enough to cope with the complexity of what that meant. He'd never experienced this before. It was very foreign to him. And unfortunately, his reaction was one of disgust and confusion. So I shut down even more so internally. So when I talk to girls and when I talk to people about sharing their story, it's not so much that, you know, he did the wrong thing. It's that he didn't have the capacity to deal with the enormity of what his wife had just shared with him. So we need to look for specialist organisations such as Stepping Out, people that are aware, like Lucy spoke of, you know, your 5 people that you have trusted in your life that have already raised their hand and said, I am here for you. So when you go to those people and you receive validation and you receive comfort and someone just says, I'm here to listen, what do you need? That is life-changing. That is the pivotal strength and care that we as children didn't receive. So to have that later in life, that honestly did open me up personally to go, okay, well, maybe I can share this. I just need to be careful who I share it with. So I found safe people that were strong enough, that were aware of how to respond appropriately. So it's about just choosing that network, that support network, very wisely, and then really pressing into the support that is offered, like the specialist services that Melissa just spoke about, because they can meet you where you're at, which is crucial for recovery.
And I guess just following on from that, it's about being believed, isn't it?
It is, and just no judgment, just someone to say, how can I help you? What do you need? What are you dealing with right now that's just too much? And I had never been asked that question until I was 26 years old and put my hand up and said, I'm struggling, I need help, and this is what happened to me. And it wasn't those closest to me that provided that support. It was external specialists.
Yeah, I think sometimes the people closest to us just feel so bad that it happened to you that they just don't know where to go with it, you know.
It's a
Lucy,
taboo subject as well.
sorry?
It's a taboo subject.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's hard, you know, and hard things are sometimes too hard for the people that love us the most. Lucy, mental health issues in general are the number one cost to the government. Do you believe that early intervention, more informed youth and awareness could be the key to managing these issues and problems?
Look, Gil, you know, the hideous economic term around the burden of disease really is a burden, and it's very expensive. And when it comes to mental ill health, the frustrating part for me is that we know that mental illness is preventable. And so we need to start from that premise and think about strategies for prevention and early intervention. And our best buys, if we think about it in that way, in an economic lens or in a policy lens, are twofold. One is to reduce or ultimately eliminate adverse childhood experiences, of which childhood sexual abuse is heinous and there, and to also improve our parenting skills. And again, they're kind of funny taboos where people are often saying, oh, we can't go and tell people how to parent. But actually, one of the most Googled subjects is parenting. Parents want to know how to be better parents.
Yeah.
And so I think where we can really provide some great support, you know, I worked with the great Mari Bashir in community mental health for a while, and we worked in juvenile justice. And, you know, Mari's view was it starts pre-conception. And if you miss the preconception moment, you start at conception, you work in pregnancy, you work after birth, but there's always points that we can intervene and reset a trajectory to a more positive one. And I think that's kind of the optimistic view that we have to take, but it's a very energetic strategy that has to be adopted by all of us in our communities.
Yeah, it takes work, doesn't it?
It does.
Speaking of that, we've spoken a little bit about some simple strategies that we can adopt to look after our own mental health. Do you want to elaborate on that, Lucy?
Look, I think there's lots of things that we can all do to look after our mental health and well-being, and we have touched on some of those. It's really important that we equip our kids with some strategies for protection, having those 5 people. It's really important that we do some of the basics right, like get good sleep, get the right amount of exercise, eat well, speak out when we just, you know, if we have a lump or bump physically, we'll go and get some help. If we encounter an emotional lump or bump, we should also be asking for some help. That doesn't need a whole clinical program. It could just be coffee with a friend to try and get some clarity. Once we get a bit more adept at that, we can look at things like meditation and mindfulness, and they are great, but often in the early stages of trauma, it might be a little daunting to go to that place of closing your eyes. So, you know, one step at a time on these journeys. But there's a lot of things we can do for ourselves, but there's a lot we can do to help each other, because we know that when someone is struggling, often their own self-awareness can be the first thing to go. So to be what I like to call an emotional mirror to a friend, to notice a change, to inquire about that change, and to help them plan, as Rene said. You know, I noticed that you've withdrawn. You used to be the bubbly kid in the classroom. Now you're sitting in the library all the time. Imagine there might be something going on for you.
Yeah.
There is. What can we do? What can I do to help you? Very simple strategies, but if you ask that question really early, the outcome can be very different to waiting 25, 26 years to notice.
And even as an adult, that can be a very powerful thing to do with a friend, you know, and very nourishing as the person on the receiving end of that, because somebody is noticing,
Yes.
you know. Rene, during CSA Awareness Week, Stepping Out appointed you as an ambassador. Congratulations, how fantastic. Is it appropriate that we finish, before we go into some Q&As from our audience, with your view on the possibility of recovery and healing? Is it possible to recover and heal?
Look, it is it really is possible. And I love this question. And I love it when people ask, because I get so excited about the fact that we are doing a webinar about childhood sexual abuse, and we've dedicated an entire week to it, thanks to Stepping Out, right? So I'm just so excited that we're talking more, we're getting out there. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the police headquarters at Oxley here in Queensland to speak to specialist investigators. There are so many people coming on board now saying, how do we do this better? How can we help you? And it is movements like that, it's actions like that, it's boldness and courage like that, that just makes me as a survivor so happy. And you know what? It's hard work. It does take consistent effort. But I say to everybody that I talk to, you are so worth it. You are worth it. It all comes down to that first belief of, I deserve this. I deserve to be happy. This was not my fault. And now we have a community of people speaking out about it, saying, I'm here for you. Anything you need, you can come to me. And it's not just an isolated incident now. This webinar, Stepping Out, we're all here. We're all from different walks of life. We've all got our own history and our own experiences, but we've come together as a united front because we want to make a difference. And the amount of hearts and transparency and authenticity just here right now just warms my heart. And recovery is possible. After everything that I went through, I'm healed, I'm whole, I'm happy, I'm thriving, because I had to trust the process. And I just wish so much that Stepping Out was around when I put my hand up. And now that they are, I'm just so excited to be aligned with them and to be able to speak more about it and have somewhere to direct people to for the very first time that's sincerely allocated to this very complex, entrenched issue.
Oh, thank you, Rene, and thanks to all our panelists. And you're not off the hook yet. We've got some questions. We do have some questions from our audience, and the first one is to everyone. How does this stress and trauma affect your physical and emotional response?
Who wants to go? I'll go. I'll get
Let's
over
start
it.
with you, Rene.
Yeah, look, I had immense health problems. I didn't know that it was from what I'd experienced through life, but living at that hypervigilant state for the majority of my life, I was always fearful. Who was coming in my home? Who was coming in my room? Who was coming over tonight? And so I was always afraid, always scared. I had digestion issues. I had upper respiratory issues. I had insomnia. I had stress, pains in my body, sore neck, sore back. It really did creep into the majority of my physical body because we carry trauma in our nervous system. It doesn't just go away when the incidents stop. We absorb those sensations. So anytime stress came into my life, I would shut down. I didn't know how to cope. I would get instantly fatigued, very depressed. So again, part of learning recovery and what this meant, it was such a relief to me to realize I'm not going insane. There's nothing wrong with me. This is part of the process. This is the byproduct of the trauma you went through. So there's a myriad of issues that come with this, but they can be completely alleviated as you work through that recovery process and understand the effects of trauma, which is another awesome process that you go through when you deal with a specialist service, because they unwrap that for you And knowledge was so powerful and relieving to me.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything? Or
can I just add something briefly, Gil? I think the things that Renee's touched on are really powerful, because one of the reasons we know that disclosure is difficult, particularly for kids, is they actually don't have the words around the disclosure. This is so foreign to them. It's not something that they know how to put into words. So for caregivers, whether that's within a family or community or professional carers, to actually see kids that often will report physical symptoms can be a real indicator that maybe there's something going on that needs a little bit more exploration than just a sore tummy or shortness of breath. And so to be mindful that kids don't always have the words, but their body might tell the story for them, and be ready to listen to that as well.
yeah, thank you. Renee, another question for you, sort of leading on from the other one, I guess. Being kind and compassionate to yourself is important to recovery. What did you do for yourself? What are the sort of, activities or spoilings or whatever that you did to help yourself on the road to recovery?
Yeah, look, at the beginning, it was quite difficult to take that on board, that I was worthy of any type of self-care. I didn't even know what self-care meant. I had no concept. So when people started talking to me about how important that was, and they asked me, what do you like to do? I had no answers. So again, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know. It was a total relearning, because I'd never been allowed or permitted to do anything that brought pleasure just to me. So what I did learn is that I love beach walks. I love being close to the ocean. I love reading books. I love being able to just snuggle up in a corner, grab a book and just have some downtime. And exercise was it's a game changer. Still today, every day I exercise, because it was so good to feel my body getting stronger, because I'd spent my whole life feeling weak and powerless. So it really was a mental game changer for me. I could feel my body getting stronger. It made me more confident, not in a vanity sense, as in an internal sense. I was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. So it was that sense of accomplishment as well.
The power of nature and exercise seems to be something that helps with everything. And, so often it's the thing that we, shove to the corner when we're busy or stressed. So it's really nice to hear that reiterated. Lucy, a question for you. Is the trauma related to childhood sexual abuse something that is addressed at the commission level? Do you think it's important to be addressed at that level?
Absolutely, Gil, and we are very fortunate that amongst the board of commissioners that we have Professor Helen Milroy, who is a Indigenous woman and a strong and powerful Indigenous woman, but she's also a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and she was one of the Royal Commissioners in the Child Abuse Royal Commission. And I don't think a meeting goes past that she does not raise the issue and make sure that it is squarely on our agenda, the impacts of trauma from childhood sexual abuse, but also the trauma that we experience in other parts of our community, the kids that have grown up through the drought, the kids that have been experiencing the fear of the bushfires. There's all sorts of issues around trauma that are just so important that, as we've touched on, intervene early and we can change the trajectory.
Fantastic. Melissa, the panel's touched on having more positive relationships, and the person asking this question says, I don't have the confidence to do that. Where do I start?
We hear that so much, and we see it, because another term for childhood sexual abuse is betrayal trauma. So you've been betrayed by the very people who are in charge of keeping you safe. So the trust that is involved for any kind of positive relationship, and that's not just an intimate relationship, it's a relationship with your body, relationship with your children, with bosses, with authority, with teachers, really affects your whole life, the capacity to build a relationship where you can trust. So that is the deep down stuff, that is the very fundamental stuff that needs to be worked on with the recovery from trauma, and that would be through, as we've said, psychotherapy, self-care, we will be running workshops on that. So people are just that thing of people being able to share their experiences and their challenges and what's worked for them and what hasn't. We will be, that's a real issue because we see so much social isolation because of CSA.
And leading on from that, somebody else has said, I'm interested in the workshop, but wants to know, I guess, a little bit more detail about the kinds of things discussed or what will be asked of them if they do come to the workshop. Maybe if you could outline, what happens when you get there, because sometimes that's the biggest fear, isn't it? Knocking on the door and walking in.
Well, another aspect is at this stage of the game, we're not sure if it will be Zoom or in person. So, of course, with Zoom, there's always the capacity to turn off your camera. You could share as much or as little as you want. I think the kind of things that would be discussed, of course, it would be about a safe space. We never, ever, ever would ask someone, what happened to you? We're really just interested in the impacts on their lives. And a lot of stuff is catching up. Rene touched upon when you're a child and you are abused, then you miss out on a lot of memos about how to form positive relationships. So a lot of it is just catching up on that fundamental information about how to trust people, how to love people, how to be loved, and how to engage in a wider sense.
And I guess that the power of not feeling alone, you can never underestimate.
It's a very good start, I think, for people to be able to form that connection as a group with a common interest and a therapeutic bent to it. Then that is a really good start. And the aim of it is to send people out into the wider world, because your world can be very, very small when you're a CSA survivor and you're in isolation.
Thanks, Melissa. We've got a question for Rene, and our questioner is, I struggle to find my own purpose and passion. To the panel, maybe we'll start with Rene. Do you have some ideas on where I can start?
Yeah, I always talk about identity. Identity for me was and continues to be something that I work on personally every single day. Who am I? Not what the world says that I am or who the world says I am. Who am I to me? What's important to me? So what gets me out of bed in the morning, or what am I passionate about, or where are my strengths? And at the beginning, it was very hard for me to identify what they actually were. So again, going back to that amazing support network that I was starting to build, I asked them, what are my strengths? What do you see that I'm good at? What, when I leave the room, what sort of things do you say? Oh, I love that Rene such and such, because when you're building and trying to find out who am I, what are these things, what are my passions, you often don't know. So going to those people, like I said, the safe people, the network, right? The ones that are walking this journey with you. That was one of the best exercises I ever did, because that's when I started to learn, oh my gosh, I'm great at encouraging others. And I'm a nurturer. I'm a natural nurturer. Now go figure, I never had it yet for some reason. It just pours out of me. And that very may be why. So I get excited now when I realize that what happened to me refined my greatest strengths to bring me to my passionate purpose today, which is speaking. Now, I was the kid that was terrified to speak and was told not to speak, and now I speak. So never, ever do away with what you went through. You can take gold from that. You can absolutely reach a place that what you think was taken has actually something that you will take back and use to change the world.
And just while we're with you, Rene, somebody's asked, how long, we all want to know, how long does it take to get better, or to get to the place, I should say, to get to the place that you are at now?
Look, everybody is so unique, and everybody's experience is unique, and the way we share is unique. And this is not my way of disregarding the question. This is my way of saying, take your own time and walk your own path, because for me, it took me, but to get to the point where I can actually not be triggered by my past, it took 16 years. And that wasn't 16 years of terrible days. That was years of great time. But then something would happen and it would bring things up for me, and I would have to go back and speak to a counsellor or a psychologist and continue to work on those things just to maintain stability. But to come completely out the other side and start speaking trauma free, it was a 16-year-long journey, but it was an amazing journey.
And I guess it's made you the person who you are today. So.
100%.
Another question, and I'm quoting here, due to CSA, my mental health seems to be too much for people, including family and friends. So a huge thank you to Stepping Out for being part of my life. Well done, Rene. The parallel of our stories is amazing. Recovery for me is lifelong. I'm extremely happy that I believe I have broken the cycle for my children. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
So good.
Lucy, can we keep this topic going, in particular as the Commissioner of Mental Health?
Absolutely. So as I said, we have Helen Milroy particularly championing this issue all the time, but we have pushed at the Commission for a few years. We pushed to actually have a national children's mental health and wellbeing strategy. Australia never had one. We always assumed for some reason that mental health started at 12, and yet actually we know it starts preconception, as I've said. But we last year, the Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, actually announced and tasked the Commission with developing the first national children's mental health and wellbeing strategy. And that's being developed at the moment. We've got a draft ready to go to the Minister for review shortly. That's been developed by experts through experience, clinical experts, community experts. And so it's really building a foundation and platform for the Commonwealth, state, the NGO sector and the community to find their place and work around. And sitting squarely in that is this reduction of and elimination of adverse childhood experience, which CSA sits in there.
How fantastic. Thanks, Lucy. I've got a question I wanted to throw out. Question without notice. Given that COVID has meant that a lot of people are feeling a lot more isolated, and some people will be feeling a lot more trapped, and, you know, all of those sort of things. Do any of the panelists have any kind of tips about how to deal with this sort of trauma, or even, even getting out? If you're in Melbourne, until recently, getting outside was difficult in terms of all the things you're suggesting. Do you have any sort of COVID plans for people that are, having a really tough time, and obviously, in the context of CSA?
So I can talk more generally about people that are feeling, we know that there are a lot of vulnerable people feeling quite trapped at the moment for various reasons to do with COVID, and now fearful that they may be trapped again should things happen. And so I think there's a real challenge there. In Victoria, we've certainly seen the mental health surge capacity added, and centres where people can get some more help, but that's all very clinical. What we've also seen is some really strong emergence of online peer support, the Being Warm line, peer counselling services for people so that they don't need to feel as alone. It sounds like Stepping Out has developed a Zoom platform for their support. And so it's really about being there for people. But one of the things that we've seen that's really powerful this year is that actually some of our most vulnerable people are telling us they feel more connected than ever before. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're seeing is that for those of us that are in a pretty good place, our pace has actually slowed. And so we've had that little bit of extra time to wrap around people that we know are struggling for whatever reason, whether we've brought them actually back into our family home to live with us, or we've taken that time to say, you know what, I think Gil might need a FaceTime. I'll give her that. Let's lock in a regular catch up that perhaps if I'd been really busy in my commute and my day, I wouldn't have had time for. And so I think it's been really beautiful to see people, communities coming together, friends chatting and saying, Renee's the one we need to all make time for. let's create a roster to check in with Rene or whoever it might be, and consciously doing this. And that's what we need. We want to hold on to, I think, out the other side. But, you know, we are in this together. We're getting through it together. There are things we can do, but I always get a bit cross when you particularly hear of services saying, oh, they've got that, nobody reached out. Well, you know what? It's really hard to take that first step. So why not be the one that goes and knocks on the door and says, let's take the first step out together, rather than expect people to do it on their own.
And that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is, where do you first start when you're looking for help? How do you start this quest for recovery?
I can share from my own story and what I encourage some of the girls or the ladies that come to me and say, I just don't know what to do. And I always go, well, you've just done it. You've asked the question. And they're like, oh, because we don't realize how actually resilient we are, because we're so used to everything being painful and negative. We assume that even wanting help, you don't actually see what a big deal that is for you to turn around and say, you know what, I want to change. I need help. I want to do something. And you ask that first question, that first thought's a win. And then you followed it up with a question. That's amazing. And I always find out where they are, what type of support they want. What are they looking for? Is it just someone that they want to connect with? Because there's a lot of community groups going on now that really have elevated their presence during COVID. There is a lot of Facebook groups that are doing meetups in general areas. I know here on the Sunshine Coast, I flagged that as a need, and I connected my network and said, right, who among us is going to put something on their platform, and let's start doing meetups. Don't just text, get your little cute butt out of your house and, like Lucy said, knock on the door and say, hey, or drop a basket of fruit and veggies off. You know, we've got to get better at that human connection. And people are starting to realize, actually, I can just use what's in my hand to help somebody else. So if you're not quite sure where to start, touch base with Stepping Out. Have a good, Google's amazing. Google helps me all the time. If I'm stuck on a particular issue, I will Google and I will contact people and just make a general inquiry, because that's quite safe as well. You're not just fronting up somewhere. And, you know, with Stepping Out having the Zoom platform, you don't have to have your photo on there. If it gets too intense, you can clock out and come back in when it suits you. There are a lot of things available. So reach out to a service, reach out to me, have a Google, and just get that little bit brave about making that first question, because you can do it safely and anonymously if you need to.
I would say too to speak to your GP, or it can be a mental health issue, and sometimes people come off the back of a mental health crisis because of the PTSD. So when that happens, the help is there for you. It is, you know, all of our services, whether it's mental health, Stepping Out, a GP, it's all about referring you to the appropriate service to get you on your way. And as Lucy said before, jump on the time, jump on that moment, because it's really hard for people to come forward and ask for help. It's a momentous moment in their life. So they deserve the help, and it's timely that they get the help there and then.
And sometimes it's the smallest things that can make the biggest difference. I mean, we all know that. And I agree with you, Lucy. I think if there's a silver lining in COVID, it's that everyone slowed down and we're smelling the roses and spending more time with, you know, the people that we love and the people that we care about. I'd like to share with you a couple of comments that have come through. Stepping Out changed my life in 1993 as a young person. CSA is always with me, but I manage a relatively normal life, whatever that is. I've always struggled with relationships and friendships. And that's a great comment, isn't it? What is a normal life? You know, we're all doing the best we can. And from another person commenting on Stepping Out's Facebook page, that she'd not told her story for more than 40 years. So I guess, Melissa, this week is all about, not just this week for Stepping Out, but this week is the focus is on, you know, speaking out. How can we encourage people to tell their stories?
Well, that's what we're doing here and now. I think it's about reducing the stigma. It's about challenging the taboo aspect. It's about addressing the stigma and putting the shame where the shame should be, not with the survivors, and creating safe spaces for people to do that. And I mean, it's correct. We have Zoom. We have various ways that people can do that. We acknowledge how challenging it is, and the longer it is, the harder it is to come forward with that information and disclose. So everything that we're talking about, there's every reason to be hopeful about a space for people to say that. But that really was heartbreaking to consider 40 years of carrying that burden alone. So yeah, we are here.
And keeping with you, Melissa, we have another question. As a survivor, people have told me I need to manage myself better. I feel so frustrated and cranky. What can I do? Where do you first start when looking for help? And we've touched on that. Why does re-victimisation occur for CSA survivors, and how do we address that?
Oh, there's a lot of things in there, but
I think we've kind of talked a bit about where do we first start when looking. So maybe let's take the last part about re-victimisation.
Well, but the first part is useful as well, because this is a feminist issue as well, that women are supposed to behave themselves and not supposed to externalize their feelings. And with mental health, things can get a little chaotic, and people do get frustrated and cranky, and that's seen as unacceptable or challenging to people. So everything that we've spoken about up to this point, it's not about addressing those behaviours, it's about addressing the feelings behind them. So, unless you're breaking the law or hurting somebody, the problem there is your feelings of crankiness and frustration. So all of the self-care stuff that we talked about, peer support, psychotherapy, self-care, all of those things. So, yeah. And re-victimisation occurs when when there's no support or treatment, there's no intervention at all. It's just a part of the process. It's part of the, it's the next step along is re-victimisation if nothing is done about the abuse in the first place. I don't know if Lucy or Rene, you have more to say on that?
I think part of that whole re-victimisation process for me was going to the wrong people and reaching out to what I thought would be a safe person. And because, like I said before, they didn't have the capacity, they put that back on me. And, we have to be so mindful and aware that not a lot of people get this. Not a lot of people understand this is a big topic. And that's why I'm so grateful that we're doing this and we're talking more and more. And I spoke to the police about that as well, because they are very, very, careful and mindful and working on not doing that. When people disclose, it was like, okay, well, Rene, what words do we use? What tactics do we use that may cause us to re-victimize unknowingly? So the services that are out there, the people that are there to help you, really are the best ones to talk to, because they understand how to stop that from happening. They know the language, they know about trauma, and they're on your side. They're equipped to deal with that. And that's why, if you're watching this right now and you really are, where do I go? I'm ready. Who do I talk to? Stepping out. They are there right now. And if it's not something that, it's an area thing, or you might need something else, they can tell you. You're not going to ring them and they go, no, we can't help you. And I think sometimes we think we're beyond help. That's the other thing. Sometimes we re-victimize ourselves because we think we're broken and we're unfixable. And it's simply not true. You can get well, you can do this, and stepping out of here to help you.
And what a perfect time to bring our conversation to a close. Thank you, everyone, for being part of today. To our panellists, Lucy, Rene and Melissa, and particularly for the brave people that have sent in their questions or comments, and actually for everybody that's watching this webinar. I think education is often the first step in recovery too, and by watching this, that's the first step, you know, towards a better life. If anything discussed today raises issues for you, contact Stepping Out during business hours on 02 9569 6512. That's 9569 6512, or of course, Lifeline anytime on 13 11 14. That's 13 11 14. Again, massive thanks to our panelists, Lucy, Rene and Melissa. If you want more details or you want to donate to Stepping Out to help us in the valuable work that they do, supporting female survivors of childhood sexual abuse, please go to the website steppingout.org.au, or Renee's best friend Google will help you will help you find it. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure to be part of today. My name's Gil Minervini. I urge you to go to the website and to talk, because this week is It's Time to Talk week. Thank you everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.